and Finn are back.
OMG, comma, no, exclamation point.
On 96 Rock.
8:06 rolling along on this Monday, January the 11th. The off season is underway for the Cincinnati Bengals because they went down on Saturday to the New York Jets 24-14, and he certainly wrote about it for Sunday's edition of the Inquirer in Cincinnati.com. There's a column in there today as well. You can catch him weekly on SI.com. He's all over the place. He is one Paul Daugherty. Doc, how you doing this morning?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing okay. Now, Doc, let's go back to Saturday's game against the Jets. And let me ask you, season as a whole, and obviously much better than last year when there was a time when people wondered if the Bengals were even going to win a game. But do you, with the way that it ended down the stretch, losing 4 out of 5, do you still consider this season a success?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think they... And you know what, Gambo, the thing about the NFL, guys come and go so much. It's very hard to duplicate year to year this sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, chemistry, camaraderie, whatever that these guys had this year. They won't have it again next year. You just don't get that. That said, you know, they seem to have developed some sort of an identity. If they can keep Mike Zimmer, they really have a gem as a defensive coordinator. They've got a core of guys that they believe is good enough to build around. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, in the heat of the moment, when everybody's disappointed, and I understand that, you're going to say, you know, they really screwed up at the end of the year, and they did, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they did win 10 games when everybody else, myself included, thought in August they'd be lucky to win 8.
No, I'm with it. And I guess, Doc, you know, two components that you do need to be a consistent winner. You need to be able to run the football. They certainly were able to do that with Cedric Benson, who had a terrific year in a big-time game even on Saturday. Defensively, they played well pretty much all season long. They did have some injuries. You're going to have that. But I feel pretty good about those two components. Doc, what I'm worried about is this passing offense, which a couple years ago seemed to be maybe among the best in the NFL. What the hell happened to that down the stretch?
Well, not just down the stretch. I mean, the passing game's been living on rep for a couple of years. You still see national writers refer to Carson Palmer as an elite quarterback. He's anything but. And I love Carson. I'm not really down on him. I think that he can get back to being a pretty good NFL quarterback if they surround him with some talent. I mean, if you look at what they had in 2005 for him to deal with and what they have now, it's not even close. And another guy that needs to be looked at very seriously, and I know this isn't a newsflash to most people, is Bob Bratkowski. And again, I've always said that an offensive coordinator is only as good as the toys he's got to play with, and they didn't have many toys this year. That said, it seems to me to be kind of a classic change of scenery thing where Bob moves along and gets a job elsewhere where maybe he's revived and rejuvenated, and the Bengals bring in somebody who's got some new ideas because when my wife can sit in front of the television and say on 1st and 10 where they're going to run Benson off right tackle, and that's exactly what they do, and when every audible that Carson makes is to give the ball to Benson again off tackle, you know something's become a little bit too predictable.
Well, you may have mentioned that yesterday in the paper, Doc, that and the surrounding Palmer with some better toys. But I always felt like, and I went to a game or two early in the season when they had Henry, I didn't feel like they were using him as much as they should. And he was obviously he was a good deterrent to keep people off at Chad and whatnot and things like that. But so that's neither here nor there because that issue is what it is. But to get back to Bratkowski, I mean, we sat up there and watched right tackle, left tackle, up the middle punt. I mean, that seems to be his mantra, and it has been forever. And you've defended him in years past, admittedly.
Right.
I think you're right. He has got to go, and they've got to get some fresh. And I think some of the fire we saw in Marvin in the Hard Knocks show, did that diminish over the course of the year, or was that just for TV?
I don't know. I couldn't say. I think Marvin really liked this team. I know that. He liked the fact that they came to work every day and were serious and made meetings on time and what have you. I don't think his fire diminished. I think by the end of the year, by Saturday, and I'd mentioned this last week on the blog, I think they were kind of physically and emotionally out of gas. I mean, that didn't look like a really really up football team on Saturday, even with the crowd, the home crowd. It didn't look like a team that was really ready to play football for 60 minutes. And I think a lot of that had to do with the injuries that they've had and the emotional stuff they've had to go through this year.
Doc, let me ask you, and this is we had Joe Walter on, the former Bengal legend, and he talked about offensive line standpoint being great run blockers, not so good in pass protection. I think all you have to do is watch that because in many instances Palmer didn't have much time to throw the ball. But the one thing that I want to bring up and see what you think is, when I watch the Bengals, and just to what you just said about the attitude and being spent, it just seems like, I don't know what it is about this team. They just seem like they're not poised to win games that matter. Can there be truth to that?
Well, I don't know. They did go 6-0 in the division. I think the games, all 4 games against Pittsburgh and Baltimore mattered. I mean, define a game that matters.
Well, I'll define again. The Ravens, to me, what they did yesterday, granted New England was god-awful, but part of that was Baltimore looked like a team primed to win that game. Bengals,
they also had a healthy Terrell Suggs coming off the edge.
True.
And Ed Reed back in the lineup. I mean, that you can be primed to win all you want, but if you don't have your 2 best players on defense, you ain't going to win.
Well, so do you think, are the Bengals, and granted, they made from 4-11-1 to this year, tremendous development in stride. Are they just a couple elite guys at certain positions away from having those type guys, from having that type of team?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think this year, like I said before, Gamble was a special year. I think, at least in terms of chemistry, all the pieces fell into place. That's not going to happen next year because it never does anywhere. They need to overhaul this offense. I don't care how they do it. They need to find out if Carson Palmer is still an elite quarterback or can be close to that. And the only way they do that is to get him some more people, some more weapons, and to give that offense some new ideas. If they don't do that, if they play next year the way they played this year, given the schedule next year, they won't come close to making the playoffs.
Well, and you make mention of that, and I was talking to a buddy of mine last night, and I said, the way to find out how good they are or were this year is what they do next year.
Yeah.
And it is a complete and utter crapshoot, like you saw 2005 to 2006.
Right. The offense is key. I think if they can keep Zimmer, and that's a big if. Buffalo's interested. Washington may or may not be interested. I don't know. Mike Shanahan doesn't have a great record of dealing with his defensive coordinators. But if they can keep Zimmer here, I think the defense will be okay. I mean, people forget that they lost Antoine Odom after, 4 games?
Yep.
The guy had 8 sacks.
Right.
They lost Ray Maluga at a very important time in the year. They lost both of their safeties. They were playing with a lot of bumps and bruises. Everybody does, but they lost some really key people. But I think the defense will be okay, but something has to give with that offense.
Paul Doherty, columnist for the Inquirer, Cincinnati.com. You can read him weekly on SI.com as well. Now, Doc, at noon today, apparently the Reds, good God, what's this, huh? I don't even know. I saw that when I saw this go across the ticker yesterday, I saw Reds Cube. I thought, you got to be kidding me. Wow.
Yeah, this kid was courted by several clubs. Lots of clubs watched him work out. I don't know if the big clubs made an offer to him, whether it was the Red Sox or Yankees made an offer. He's a very interesting guy. He's a gambler. He's a 22-year-old guy who throws 100 miles an hour from Cuba. Depending on who you talk to, apparently he's either a terrific prospect that's going to be a number 1 starter or a great bullpen guy, or a guy who's never going to reach his potential because he's immature. I would rather the Reds do what they did with this guy, which was spend apparently $25 million over 5 years, than do what they did with Scott Rowland. This is the kind of move this team needs to make. Go younger, talent, take some chances on some guys like this. Plus, you know what, Gambo, with this signing and the way that they did with Juan Duran and Yorman Rodriguez, they're building up tremendous credibility in Latin America. And that can't help but be a good thing for this team because you can find diamonds in the rough still down there. They're going to cost you a little bit more than they used to, but they're available, and some of them are already more polished than any number 1 pick you'll ever take.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have the Reds needed to do. You're right. They needed to do something like this. If you don't have those Latin America connections in your organization, it's going to be. I mean, look around. I mean, the teams that have them, it's not by accident that they're winning.
Well, they have the guy. The system down there is very interesting. They have these guys. They're called the Buscones, and they're kind of middlemen, agent types, who kind of shop players around. and they will take the best players down there to the camps of the teams that they know have been shelling out money.
Yeah.
And the Reds have been shelling out money. So anytime you can open up another area where you can find talent, especially if you're a small market club that can't just go out and buy free agents, that's a good thing.
Doug, I got to ask you a final question. Are you a reality TV guy? Are you watching the reality TV shows?
No, you know what? I watched The Amazing Race. My family and a couple others, we bet on the teams. Plus, you know what? If the reality part sucks, you still get to see the world, and that's kind of cool.
Well, let me ask you, will you watch this one coming March the 2nd to the Golf Channel? Being
What?
John Daly.